Hello, today I'd like to talk about something we face when designing horror games, and I think it's a problem with horror in general, and it's a question of, is there such a thing as bad taste? Are some things, crossing a line that maybe isn't the best to cross? And certainly I'm not talking about censorship. I don't want anything to be censored or something. In fact, I often, seek out the uncensored version. I recently got the imported version of Siren, new translation, or Blood Curse in the US, because apparently it was censored in the US, which is dumb. But, well, I just wonder sometimes when we're working on something, are we pushing a boundary, too far? Are we going into sort of the gross out element of horror in general? Which, I mean, I think there's plenty of things, that are cool and gross out. I mean, I like I think Dead Alive, Peter Jackson's one of his early films. I mean, it sort of made my stomach, but yeah, I enjoyed the movie. It was funny. It was kind of tongue in cheek, and certainly I always talk about this book and another one I have, the philosophy of horror, and they fortunately have the quote that I wanted to quote on the back of the book, so I'm prepared. And so Stephen King said, "I recognize terror as the finest emotion, and so I will try to terrorize the reader. But if I find that I cannot terrify, I will try to horrify, and if I find that I cannot horrify, I'll go for the gross out." So Stephen King has sort of this hierarchy of emotions in horror, and I've discussed the distinction between terror and horror in another developer diary. But the gross out, I think, is an element of horror and does work. I mean, certainly there's the sort of genre of body horror, and a lot of that sort of visceral grossness can create an atmosphere where you feel afraid. And then, in the other book that I quote, the philosophy of horror, they talk about how, for it to be a proper horror, the elements that the protagonists are facing have to be, unclean, disgusting, some sort of bad thing, and disgusting is part of that. So I think, being disgusting has a role in horror as a genre. But the question is, are there times where, maybe it's better to dial it back? And in development of our next game, we sort of reached one of those points, and in working with the team, they were really good and suggested some things that I hadn't really thought about to basically take something, keep the emotional response that I wanted, but dialing back the thing, because the asset that I asked for when I got it made me kind of sick to my stomach, and I have a pretty good stomach for those things. I used to eat my lunch watching, like, Saw movies and whatnot. Didn't faze me. But this particular one, it wasn't even finished yet, and I felt like it was kind of upsetting my stomach. And so certainly I think that trying to approach it, trying to think about what it is we're trying to communicate, why we want that sort of shock, that effect, and shaping it into a tasteful manner, and certainly this isn't the first time we approached it, or had this issue. Like in Neverending Nightmares, well, a lot of the really gross, violent things, I was adamant that, the bones should come out in this way and it should be that gross because, that was sort of an intrusive thought that I've struggled with, and I wanted to be true to that. But there was a particular scene in the Together at Last level, spoilers, right before the branching point, where you see the adult Gabby on a table. Presumably, she had just given birth, and there's blood, and she died during childbirth, which that was my intent. I think some people might refer to it as like an abortion or something, but it was meant to be to show that she died in childbirth, at least in my mind, and that that was something that I think was a fit in the theme, and just the idea of loss, and the child and the mother and all the relationships that we're trying to explore in Neverending Nightmares. So I thought it was important for the emotional resonance, the idea of sort of one life over the other, the child over the mother, or perhaps losing them both. So I really wanted this in, but it was tough to try and well, I mean, we didn't want to look like some, grisly abortion sort of, like, some blood everywhere, and we didn't want it to look any sort of sexual, which, with the stirrups and whatnot, I mean, it is possible for it to look more, sexual or something. I don't know, more uncomfortable, at least for me. So we did a couple drawings, and let me see if I can use the magic of video editing to put them in here-ish, hereabouts, some pictures. So we found that by changing the camera angle, not having the legs sort of face towards the camera or anything like that, it seemed more tasteful, more appropriate, and still communicated what we wanted to communicate. So, I mean, I think it's a fine line, and certainly I'm not saying that anyone should compromise their vision because they think it would be in bad taste. But I think, some of the time, it's worth saying, is there another way to communicate this? And I mean, when I had started designing Neverending Nightmares, I think I've told this story before, but I, wanted to make a horror game without gore, and really make it, true horror, and distill it to its essence. And besides the fact that would have been really hard, I think, I felt like it wasn't true to my experience with mental illness. There was a lot of stuff I wanted to put in there, the violent self-harm, just all of these horrible images. So we ended up taking it in a different direction, which I think I'm very pleased we did. But, I mean, I think you can do horror without gore. I mean, you look at Five Nights at Freddy's. I think that does horror well. And, I mean, I think, like, The Evil Within, they have gore and gore and gore and gore and gore, and it's almost too much. It almost, desensitizes you to it. At least it did for me, so I think there's definitely, gore and disgusting things play an important role in horror, but I think, it's important to try and, keep it tasteful, or at least as tasteful as you can, while still achieving the emotional impact that you want it to. So anyway, thanks for watching.